Welcome to the first episode of Controversial Questions in Dog Training. We got a really interesting topic today and a potential special guest too. So we've got a really cool topic today. I thought it was really worth talking about because it's constantly coming up in our Ethology Institute group. We're constantly bringing up stress and how stress interacts with a variety of the videos we're seeing, and also how it's interacts with training. And so I've got Dr. Roger Abrantes, the educational director at the Ethology Institute, to talk about stress.
Hi, everybody. Yes, I'm very pleased to join Michael here.
Yeah. So I wanted this to be more of a free-form conversation. So I started a poll on the Facebook group, and I proposed a simple proposition, which was the ideal training environment is the one with the least amount of stress or the lowest amount of stress. And I gave people 5 options to pick from. And we generated some really interesting discussions. So we're going to go through some of the comments there. So let's get right into some of the discussion we had. I took some numbers from the poll, and I found that we had a couple options that very few people voted for. And so I want to address those first. So again, the proposition is the ideal training environment is the one with the lowest amount of stress. And 2 people strongly agreed with that statement. And I applaud you for putting out your opinion when you're in a minority position, which is sometimes very scary. Before I even get to that, what do you think about the proposition, Roger? What do you think, and what would you vote?
The first thing I would do is to read the question very, very carefully, or the proposition, and then what you expect of me. And the proposition actually says the ideal training environment is the one with the lowest amount of stress. That is what you write. So I have to agree with that or disagree, and then I can choose different levels of agreement or disagreement. Since I do not believe that it is true that the ideal training environment is the one with the lowest amount of stress, I will have to disagree. Because even good people were tricked into thinking that the correct answer to support their views would be neither agree or disagree. Can you see my point?
Yeah, it's a very weird, illusion almost that it creates. Because if you reverse the word lowest with the word highest, which yes, they're both like maximal and minimal statements. So the ideal training environment is the one with the lowest amount of stress. Replace that. The ideal training situation is the one with the highest amount of stress.
Yes.
That's obviously incorrect. And everyone can easily, or probably most people can easily disagree with that statement. Yes. But I think it should be just as easy to disagree with the lowest amount of stress too. Yes. They're both equally wrong in my mind.
And that's why we can characterize as a tricky, well, it's not a question, you don't ask a question, you make a statement. We can say that it's tricky, but it is just our brain playing. From your side, I know you didn't have any intentions of being tricky. Desiree Mallet is the head of the ART, which is the Swiss Alpine Rescue Team. It's an amazing group of people and dogs that go up in the mountains and finding people that disappear, that need to be rescued. And I know because I've been there with them, and I even certify them that their way of training is to increase stress gradually from low to high. That option takes into consideration, it says actually depends entirely on the dog's age, health, etc., but does not mention the human factor. And we know that the human factor is important as well, maybe equally important, maybe even more important. And that is one thing, again, that the ART, the Alpine Rescue Team in Switzerland, is very careful with. They train the dogs and they train the humans, the handlers. They train them separately. They increase the level of stress at which they are subjected, and then they are certified separately, because you can actually, in a team, you can have a good dog and a bad handler, or a good handler and a bad dog. So both need to be working together in order to make the team work well. Very interesting indeed.
Yeah, that would be a really interesting poll in its own right. Almost the same way, which is the trainer's stress is more the same or less important than the dog's stress?
Yes.
I'm not sure what I would vote, but I'm leaning towards the idea that the trainer's stress is more important.
Yes.
Because a trainer who is not or is at the optimal level of stress can help a dog who's at a bad level of stress.
But now let me say one thing, and with the at the risk of and peril of being accused of being boring, especially by our friend Jill Marie, who's going to join us in a little while, I hope. I have to say that you say the poll would be interesting. Yes, it would be interesting to have an idea of what is the public perception, but that poll is meaningless without a controlled study to find out whether it is true or not.
That's true. That's true. All we can rely on is our personal experiences, but those can get us off track.
Yes.
Anecdotal evidence, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So I do want to get to Jill's question and invite her on, and she's here now, so I'm gonna invite her. But like I said, we had 2 people strongly agree, 3 people agree, 7 disagree. And then we had 66 neither agree or disagree. And we caught all the extra options there. Hi, Jill.
Hey.
Yeah, and I thought it would be really interesting, partly because we're all scent detection enthusiasts, in addition to being interested in ethology and dog training and all this stuff. Jill does a lot of scent detection, for those of you who don't know her. And we're in scent detection, we are taking into account the stress levels of both the handler and the dog on a constant basis. And it factors in, and it's not just about reducing the stress, because if you reduce it too low, that actually learning doesn't happen. It's really hard to train scent detection, in my opinion, in a low stress environment.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, well, actually, it's stress is. I wrote several articles about that. There are links, I believe, on our Facebook page. And if you go to ethology.eu, you go to free articles, and I wrote. You can find them. The articles I wrote about stress, and there is no doubt that you need a certain level of arousal, stress, in order to learn, in order to retain memories. So stress is not only bad.
Yeah. Let me ask you both a question, because not too long ago we talked about enrichment, and I thought enrichment, by the definition we used, is just another way of staying stress, isn't it?
Yes, if you do the enrichment correctly, and we also talked about that. You want to combat under stimulation, but you don't want to go to the other extreme and get the animal overstimulated, or us. We have the same, humans have exactly the same problem. Parents know that. You have to stimulate your children to give them experience so they can learn and they can prepare to be, to future life. But all parents know that if you overstimulate your kid, then you're going to have trouble at about 7:30, 8 o'clock when you want to put them in bed.
Yeah, that is absolutely true. I completely agree with that.
So I've noticed that, traditionally dogs were trained in more natural environments, outdoors, in large groups of dogs often, and that there's been a shift towards smaller groups in less stimulating environments. Do you feel that shift is in general a positive or a negative for dogs, and why?
Well, I think, okay, so I'm going to hedge my answer, I think, a little bit, because I'm not one that likes to talk in absolutes, as a general thinking, but I would say that for some dogs, it helps to work in smaller environments. The problem is now we are lumping all dogs into a category of what I would deem sort of special needs dogs that need a special, quieter environment, less stimulating, to be able to acquire the skills that we're asking them to acquire that may or may not be natural to their normal daily life necessities, because it's what we want them to do, not what they want to do. So I think for, like children, there are some that need a much more controlled environment, but not every dog needs that. Some dogs learn perfectly fine out in the real world with 40 other dogs in a dog training class. I think there's been a big shift and not thinking or taking that into consideration, and every dog is treated as if it has some unique or detrimental behavioral problem, and every dog is being trained exactly the same way with that in mind, even if people aren't thinking that's the case.
You know, there are many variables. The problem is not that we train in one or the other. The problem is that we seem always to go from one extreme to the other extreme. Before, as Jill said, and I remember too, when it was like that, we trained animals in highly stressful environments right from the first moment, from the day one. And now we went to the other extreme, as Jill very well said. It's like they all are special. They need special care. We diagnose them with being stressed for very little or nothing when they actually are showing perfectly normal behavior. And then it also depends on many things. And let me say that right away, because in your poll, people added two options, and both start with depends. And I agree with both the depends. What I don't agree is that they introduced the options there, because then they sabotage the test. but or saying it in another way, it was not the right place to put that. The right place to put that was in a comment. But of course, it depends on many things. If you ask me, if we are training skills, basic skills, it's always a good idea to start them in a low stress environment and then increase gradually, not too slowly, not too fast, just that the animal can give the right response. The good trainer, the good teacher, the good coach goes exactly to the limit of what the student, independent of whether it is a human or a canine or a feline or an equine, can take. That is the role of the good teacher. If we treat others, everybody as special needs, as Jill said, children included, we end up having terribly understimulated individuals, and those individuals will not be prepared for a future life in situations that require a good stress immune system.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And the way I look at it is that there are pros and cons to the high stress environment and the low stress environment. And so if you understand what the benefits and risks are, then you can use both to your advantage. You can take the dog to a less stressful environment to do exactly what you're talking about, and then take that out into a more stressful environment to get the benefits from that. Like, we should be doing both. We shouldn't be isolating it.
Look, if you're going to use your dog and your cooperation with the dog for anything useful for anyone besides being a pet dog, then you know that you have to do that. Look, I spent most of my professional career training and certifying professionals like law enforcement, scent detection, search and rescue, the landmine detecting animals, and those teams, they cannot function in the low stress la la land that our pets live in these days. You know, they cannot. So yeah. It's not a either or. It's almost never. And for fear of being accused of being boring, not by Jill this time, but by someone else, I'm going to say that it's again a question of balance.
The only thing that I would disagree with what you said there was your statement, unless they're a pet dog. I honestly think sometimes that the pet dog's environment may be the most stressful of them all.
Yes.
Like, you look at my hunting dog, he goes to the general dog training world. He has to work in a very stressful environment. There's birds and guns and multiple dogs running around, off leash, no control, right? That's really natural for him.
Yes.
What's unnatural is having to be friendly with every person and dog he meets on the street, and having to interact with them and not being able to go away. And like, the things we demand of our pet dogs are incredibly stressful.
Yes. Now, thank you very much for mentioning that. Yes, I completely agree with you. So you don't need to disagree with me, because I agree with you. Yes. What I mean is, from our pet dogs, it's not a requirement. I mean, they can behave exactly like they want. If they cannot take stress, if the owner doesn't want them to take stress, if the owner interprets everything as stress and want them to live in a cotton or sugar-coated environment, that's fine, because that's their choice. Um, when we talk about law enforcement, search and rescue, explosives, animals, detection animals, etc., there is no option. They have to be able to cope with that. But I also want to say that I completely agree with you when you say that to be a pet dog is very stressful. Actually, it is.
I'm going to push back just a tiny bit on that, Roger, as it relates to what we need or don't need a dog to do when it relates to what we think is of value. So we put value on, let's say, the search and rescue dog, or law enforcement dog, whatnot, because we say that their job is to save lives, let's say. So we put increased value and importance on their ability to cope with stress, to function in certain environments. But where I will push back, and I wrote an article, I don't know, 20 something years ago, about the need to eliminate the word pet dog, because it just sort of has this connotation of being frivolous. And I had used the phrase a working companion dog, because in all reality, they're on call 24 hours a day to provide some service for whoever has brought them into their life. And the inability to perform can actually be life or death, or cause injury to the people that's within their lives. So it may not be on the flamboyant scale of a grand avalanche rescue, but a dog that cannot handle a normal family environment and sends a child to the hospital,
Yes.
I think in some ways is actually a more insidious thing that sort of permeates what's happening with the dogs. And the other thing that I often mention to my clients is dogs don't have behavior problems. We have problems with their behavior. And those are two completely different ways of looking at what's going on with the animal, and how we potentially approach, the training piece of what it is we're asking them to do. And I do think there needs to be a re-envisioning of how we live with our companion animals on a day-to-day basis in the
Yes,
world.
but Jill, I'm not disputing the value. I wouldn't dream of doing that. Not at all. For me, all living organisms have the same value, independent of what job they do. What I'm referring to is that the search and rescue dog and the law enforcement dog doesn't have an option. When we train them, we don't have an option. We have to train them to cope with highly stressful situations. For the pet dog, is different. I would train, of course, I would train my pet dog or companion dog to be able to cope with a lot of stressful situations. But it's a choice. I mean, if an owner tells me, oh no, we have a very quiet life, we want to have a very quiet life out in the country, we don't want any stress at all, that's fine. I cannot have any objection towards that. If a dog owner tells me, no, I only want to train my dog in low stress environment, because we will never have use for anything that is more stressful. I mean, what can I say about that? It's their choice. It's their life. I cannot say anything about that. Wouldn't you agree with that?
Um, Again, yes and no, because I think even in the professional working dog world, there's always choice. The animal has no choice. We're making the choice for them. But just like a companion dog, I have yet to see a shelter full of humans in which the dogs are walking through and choosing the family in which they're going to live with, if that makes sense.
So it makes sense to me, and I think what we're getting at is, I think what Roger's saying is that the working dogs, when they encounter a stressful environment, we're going to work them through that environment. Whereas a lot of times in the pet world, when the dog encounters that stressor, we're gonna like avoid the stressor. A lot of people are gonna avoid that stressor or try to work.
Hopefully.
Yeah, rather than try to push the dog through it. Yeah, hopefully, exactly. The dogs in the shelter, like you're pointing out, beg to differ. That we're putting our dogs in these stressful environments and not avoiding them, and then catastrophe happens, and that happens all too often, unfortunately.
Actually, it was what I was trying to say. It's much simpler than that, because I don't like to impose my values and my opinions on others. And what I mean is, when we deal with law enforcement and search and rescue and all those dogs, there is no discussion. We have them to do a job, to perform a job, and they have to be trained in a specific way. But with the companion animals, that is very. I personally, of course, I let me repeat that. I personally would train my dog, and I've also had dogs, and I've done it, to be able to cope with all kinds of situations, because I think that's what would serve them better. But that is my way of life, and that is my opinion, personal opinion. I don't find anything. I don't find any argument against a dog owner, for instance. I repeat, that tells me, oh, but we don't have that kind of life. We don't want to have that kind of life.
Right.
I don't want. My family doesn't want. My dog doesn't want. We want to live a completely different life. I don't have any argument, except if I'm going to impose my opinion on that person, and I don't think I can.
You don't think that there's a welfare argument to that? Like, even if, like, because I have this debate with someone for a long time, and they had this beagle, and they didn't crate train it, and I was like, you really ought to crate train him. It's like, well, we don't need a crate. He's a great dog. He never causes an issue. We don't need it. And I had that debate with them for a couple years, and I gave up. And then a couple years later, they told me he tore his ACL and he has to be on crate rest. And we wish we had done the work. So don't you think there's an argument there that even if your lifestyle is low stress, that some amount of building resilience to stress is valuable, even to them?
Yes, of course, you have an argument there. And I said, and I want to repeat it, I would always train my dogs to be able to cope with stress, and I always recommend people to do that. What I'm just saying is that we cannot impose this view on other people.
Yeah.
But isn't the real, like, just to get back to the foundation of what your question was really, Michael, that you posed, is do you need to have a low stress environment for training and learning to take place? If I'm phrasing that correctly, which is a much more fundamental question as opposed to the philosophical and opinion-based question of what we think is, required. So I think, what I get, in listening to what Roger is saying is that, there's no such thing as a zero stress environment. It's not outer space. So we can't have a zero gravity environment on, planet Earth, right? So we can't have a zero stress environment either. So I think that really is the crux of what the underlying question is. And the rest of the conversation around it, as Roger mentioned in, I think, one of his comments on your thread, is the difference between opinion and thought versus data supporting the initial question.
Yeah, that's a really good point, that these are two very different questions, which is it better to train in a low stress environment? And do you prefer to train in a low stress environment? Because we all have opinions on how much exposure to different stressors we want in our training, and we probably all fall in different places on that question. But we can gather data and determine what amount of stress is ideal for what types of dogs. We could actually gather that data if we wanted.
Yes, but not only for what type of dogs, also for what type of owners and what type of jobs the dogs are going to have in the future. There are many variables, as I said.
Yeah, I'm very explicit with a lot of my students. So I primarily teach competition scent detection, right? Nose work in the United States. And I make it very explicit to my handlers in the class that my goal is to create a stressful environment for you and your dog, so that when you go and compete, it doesn't feel as stressful. Go ahead, Jessica.
Well, did you guys want to take a comment?
Yeah, I noticed. Are you talking about the question from the question Q&A?
Oh, well, that one, and then there was also one earlier, because we were talking about trainer stress, you know, and Michael, you just mentioned that you want to put stress on your trainers and some people like it and some people don't. Can you elaborate a little bit on trainer stress? And then we got a comment from Felipe, it was earlier on, but he was saying that trainer stress doesn't help the dog. In my opinion, it makes the dog more stressed. So can we clarify that trainer stress?
Yeah,
issue?
I think one of the things I noticed in the comments and in a lot of conversations like this where we're talking past each other, because stress is such a huge category of things that, like, oftentimes we hear stress and we think fear or we think pain or we assume something aversive. But, like, for example, playing with a toy is also stress. So it's like, if I'm going to train my dog with a toy, I'm going to generate more stress than I am training with food. And that most people wouldn't consider that to be a negative. So I think that's important. So when I talk about putting stress on the handler, sometimes that's not a pleasant form of stress. Sometimes it's the stress of failure. Sometimes it's the stress of having not enough time to accomplish a task. But sometimes it's a very fun type of stress. So a very simple example is a game that I play in my classes where if you've never done scent detection, I'll just try to give a little preference. So the dog is trained to find an odor. Okay, it's pretty straightforward. And the handler does not know where the odor is. So the dog is going to search, and what I'll do is I'll have two handlers, both trying to call the alert to tell when the dog finds it and compete against each other. So that's stress, because now I have someone who's competing with me towards the same goal. But that stress, most people find it quite enjoyable, quite fun, and most dogs actually feed off of that excitement as well. Most of the dogs that I see when they play this game don't shut down or look more upset. They look more intense, like, wow, this is exciting, this is urgent, this is more. Now, of course, that's anecdotal. I don't have statistics and data to prove that, but I think the assumption that the stress on the handler is going to indicate more or a harmful effect on the dog isn't necessarily correct. It can be harmful and it can be beneficial.
And then we did have another question in the Q&A from Bafo,
Yeah.
and he was asking, when a dog has a lot of stress from things that happen outside, like an automatic door or a loud noise, and goes into panic, what should I do?
Yeah, so I think that goes to my earlier point about conflating stress with fear. Now, he's talking about fear, and that's definitely stress. So, like, that's a really big question. It's like, how do you handle a dog who's afraid? And I've watched a lot of different trainers handle a lot of different fearful dogs, and I've seen a lot of different things work. I've seen just leave, and I've seen that work for the dog, and I've seen just show confidence and walk through it, and I've seen that work, and I've seen both of those go horribly wrong. Do either of you have any, like, things that you've learned from working with fearful dogs that you could say is like a good rule of thumb or something like that?
We're actually going to talk about fear later on at a later date. We're going to focus on fear, so we don't have to necessarily do fear right now.
I'm also going to in the next an ethologist reacts. We're going to talk about stress again, but from an ethology point of view. We're going to look at behaviors, different clips of canine behaviors, which normally are classified as stress, and we're going to find out whether they are or not signs of stress.
I think there's an analogy in regular obedience style training and trick training of, like, this idea of free shaping. I think that's one of the powers of free shaping, is that it's highly stressful and there's no help from the handler other than the marker. So the dog is on their own to solve the problem, and that's an incredibly stressful environment. I think that's one of the reasons it's such a valuable
Michael,
thing.
let me just ask you, what is a marker?
A marker is a conditioned reinforcer.
Oh,
so
okay. Thank you very much for clarifying that for us. Yes. It's good we use the same language, you know.
Do you think that the reason why there has been an exponential push towards this no stress, everything must feel good during training sort of philosophy actually has more to do with the human element than the dog, that it's actually the humans that need the low stress, feel good, everything is hunky-dory training environment, then
I think
the
it's
dog actually does.
100%. I think it's 100% anthropomorphic. It is reflection of our desires as people, because the environment that dogs evolved in and other animals evolved in, honestly, even we evolved in since our cultural, the culture kind of took over. It was not stress-free. We're all designed to work in highly stressful environments, and especially dogs. So I definitely think I push towards stress-free environments and error-free learning is complete anthropomorphization.
Yeah, I just so you know, I'm going to put it out there. I do not believe in error-free learning. So I'm just saying it. You can all.
We should have that as a topic one day, because that I could rant for days about error-free learning.
All right, you guys want to take a question from Javier? Okay, we'll do it. It's another training question. So Javier is asking, if you're training a dog who is going to be required to perform in a stressful environment, do you train that dog in a stressful environment from day one?
Can I answer that?
Sure.
If you are doing it for any serious purpose, I wouldn't do it. I would start, as always, I use the Lego. You know, Lego, all of you have played with Lego, right? I use the Lego method, which is first we learn to handle the pieces, then we learn to put them together, and then in the end we can build whatever we want. So that means first I make a plan. What skills do I need? What signals do I need? What reinforcers do I need? What inhibitors do I need? And then I teach them separately to the dog and to the handler so that they both can use it. And then I begin increasing gradually, as I said, the level of stress or the level of, environmental distractions, whatever you want to call it. I begin to maybe also reduce the intensity of the signals, so that in the end I reach the situation where I want the dog and the handler to function properly. But I will always do it gradually.
Let me throw a counter argument to that. Like, not even a counter argument, just like maybe on a parallel track. I would say what's more important than whether or not you train that dog in a stress-free environment or a stressful environment, what's more important, if the dog has to be reliable in a stressful environment, then you should be selecting a dog who has the temperament to cope with that environment. That comes before what you train and what environment you train it in. Because I don't care if you train it perfectly in the right environments. If the dog doesn't have the baseline ability to cope, it will fail.
Yeah, but that goes for us humans as well. I mean, look, I've worked with, as you know, with law enforcement almost all my career. And with what we request of the dog is the same we request of the human element. I've seen many law enforcement officers that were absolutely great to scent detection, for instance. They could take everything you gave them, explosives, doesn't matter. But they were not the kind of person that would go to riots, for instance, or this kind of more, one-on-one fight, or whatever you want to call it. So we are different, and we can perform different jobs better than others. And the same applies for the dog. So you have to choose the right person and the right animal for the right job.
Yeah. And can I just say something in speaking to the human piece of that, which I think is really one of the most critical parts of this whole discussion, is that many people, their performance improves when in a highly stressful or even dangerous situation.
There are many paths to the top of the mountain.
Yeah.
And another thing, who says that everybody wants to reach the top of the mountain?
Yeah. Yeah.
You guys also wanted to talk about the scale, right? The pole scale a little bit?
Oh, the Likert scale.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I can very shortly say, but you can read my comment on the group, because what I wanted to say is that when we make polls or questionnaires or whatever this kind of investigation that we do, it doesn't matter for me whether it is for fun or not for fun. For me, there is no fun in these kind of things, because these kind of things are important and they shape and they influence the public mind. therefore, we have to be very precise with this kind of questionnaires. Look, we live in a world of misinformation where they throw at us numbers and figures which are incorrect from all points of scientific, statistical point of view. And I don't think, I think we have to be very careful, and therefore I interfered in the group in explaining what was proper statistical treatment of data and what we can find reliable or not. Now, the poll that we have on our group is very interesting. It gives us many good ideas. I'm really grateful. Thank you to all who commented. That was really amazing. But the results are by no means of any scientific validity at all. Please do not take them as that. The poll does not live up to the standard of statistical significant results.
In the poll, we got a lot of comments. We didn't necessarily get a whole lot of specific questions, but one thing that was interesting was Anna had mentioned that there's a the Yerkes-Dodson, is that how you say that? It's a scale for optimal performance. Where is it? She says mental and physical levels of arousal are necessary to achieve optimal performance. However, we adapt the knowledge to the individual needs, like we've been talking about. So did you guys want to talk about that a little bit in our final minutes?
I have no comments other than I think it's based on data. It's correct, I presume, yes?
It's kind of what we've been talking about this whole time. Yeah, you have to adapt to each situation, each dog, each person, and the way you adapt is with your intuition experience, and that's really important. But I think the other thing that we're saying is that you should be afraid of both extremes, of too little stress and too much stress. Like, they both cause problems. So don't be more afraid of one side than the other. They're both bad.
Yes, but that's what I initially said, that I think what goes wrong in most things that we do is that we always go from one extreme to the other extreme.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, we're at about an hour. Michael, did you want to wrap up?
Let's close it up. Thank you, Jill, for joining us.
Thanks for inviting me. It was fun. It was great to see you guys. I miss you all so much. Michael, I get to see you a little bit more often, but still, it's nice to see you, and it's great seeing you, Roger.
Thank you, and likewise, very nice to meet you, and I hope we can have you here some more times.
And of course, thank you all for joining us here today for our first controversial questions with Michael McManus. And I'm sure you can always reach out to him if you have any controversial dog training questions that you want covered. Definitely get in touch with Michael.
Yeah, definitely let me know. If you have a topic you want us to talk about, then let me know and I will do it.
All right, sounds good. Okay, then thank you guys. That was our first controversial questions, and we will see students on Thursday. We'll see all of you back 2 weeks from today.
Thank you, everybody, and see you soon again.